Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of the Peasants Perspective. All right, so it looks like we are live everywhere. If you're listening, can you please make a comment in the chat so that I can see that you're here? It looks like we're live on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and X. And as you can see, I'm not in the office. Yes, Pony Boy, thank you. All right, looks like we are up, and you're on Rumble. That's great. If anybody else out there randomly wants to do a check on YouTube, Facebook, and X, that'd be awesome. On my end, it looks like they're working. Hopefully they are. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. We're going to have a different show. Obviously, I'm on the road. Told you guys that was going to happen, and it's going to be another day or two. I'm not sure exactly how long I'm going to be gone, but we're trying out a different little Rumble Studio program here. It's actually pretty cool, but the thing I can't quite figure out is how to share my screen. So I'm going to try to share my screen one time with everybody live watching and tell me if you can see what I'm doing, okay? If you can't see what I'm doing, just put it in the chat. I think there's like a 2-second delay, probably take a couple seconds to get back to me. I'm sharing my screen. Can anybody see it? Anybody see it? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm going to keep talking, and you guys can do that. All right. A little bit different today. This weekend was crazy. Last Friday, I missed a story. I missed a story because it basically happened after we had recorded the other episode, and that was the story about James Comey and that 86-47 deal, which is really one of those things like, what's going on? Okay, ready? Not yet. Okay, so it's not showing. Okay, that's good to know. At least I know. Okay, so James Comey put the 86-47 thing, which then triggered off a whole firestorm simultaneously last week, and we really didn't cover much of this. It was one of those things that I had it on like 2 or 3 of last week's shows, and just time runs short, right? There's so much stuff going on, and so I did get a chance to go over all the Jake Tapper books and all the accusations about Joe Biden and his mental health and stuff like that. But one thing that we really weren't watching was something like cancer, which is funny because last year Laura Loomer actually made a post about being confirmed that Joe Biden's illness is terminal, which it looks like it is. And this morning on Morning Joe, there was a clip that went like this. So I'm going to do this a little bit different since my share screen's not working. We're just going to go like really old school ghetto, and I'm literally going to hold my camera and show you this little clip because it is actually pretty stunning what he says here. Okay, so let me go here. You guys are going to get to see this. It's not going to be a good angle, but at least you'll get to like see it and hear it, guys. So sorry about it being kind of weird like this.
Incredibly respected.
He probably had it at the start of his presidency. Okay. I think that's probably the one and only time I'm going to do that because it's pretty dumb. So we'll just talk through it. If I can't share screen, it alters the show, that's for sure, right? Okay, so you guys are back. I don't know how good that sounded or not because I can't see it in real time. But, oh, no sound. Oh, awesome. Okay, let's see. All right, you can hear me now, though, right? I think so. How fun. Okay, so basically what we're seeing here is you've got this. Is he live? I don't see anything. Yes. Okay. So, can you see me now? Should be able to see me now. Everybody, everything should, it looks like I'm working on my end. So, all right, you hear me fine. Okay. So, let me give you a little timeline of events that happened last week. So, last week, in February 26th, Jake Tapper made a book announcement saying that who's a CNN anchor, and it was a book that he co-wrote with Axios reporter Alex Thompson. He announced his book, Original Sin: President Biden's Decline. I think that's what it was called, President Biden's Decline. And then it's set for release like in the next, I think tomorrow, Tuesday, so May 20th. The book focuses on Biden's mental health, his physical decline during his presidency, alleging his cover-up of the inner circle. So Jake Tapper and Alex interviewed, I think they said over 200 people that were in the administration and had direct access to Joe Biden. So this is like a pretty big deal. And of course, anything written by CNN, Jake Tapper, this is like, in my opinion, this is a cover-up. This is one of those things that you do to go, oh, look, I was unaware, but now as soon as I became aware, it was a big news story, and they start pointing the finger. That's what this looks like to me. His announcements drawn tons of criticism, especially from the conservative ecosystem, because we included, have been accusing Tapper of complicitly downplaying Biden's condition during the 24 election cycle, and from other liberals who argue he's profiting from a narrative he previously underreported. I did play a clip last week of him telling Laura Trump when she mentioned that he had dementia or something like that, and Jake Tapper just kind of blew her up and was like, "She doesn't have dementia. How could dare you do that? You probably don't appreciate you shouldn't appreciate it when people diagnose your father from afar." The crazy thing about that is he turns around and does just that, diagnoses her father from afar. These people are so okay, I don't hear or see anything. Rumble is bad while on X. Okay, so is this any better? Is that better for sound? If I get that thing, is that better for sound? It's probably just a matter of getting this thing closer to me. Is that any better for sound, you guys? I've got a little feedback for myself, and I can hear myself, so I think it's okay. I see you on Rumble 5x5. I can't hear anything. Okay. Well, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Everything on my end looks like it should be fine. The only thing I could do is see if that changes anything. Probably doesn't change anything. Okay. I don't hear or see anything on Rumble is bad. Sound is also 5x5. What does 5x5 mean? You're going to have to explain that. I don't know what 5x5 means. Okay, well, I'll continue talking because why not? So one of the accusations is that now that, it's okay, except for your blue shirt. What are you talking about? I like my shirt. Okay, so yeah, okay. Okay. Oh, I love the chat. This is cool. I actually really like this Rumble Studio. We're going to have to figure out how to use it better because I can monitor all the chats live at the same time, which is really cool. Obviously, we've got someone right now on YouTube, which is awesome. Nobody on Facebook or X. Come on. All right. So this is a small show, as you guys know, but we're growing like rapidly. So the criticism is that Tapper downplayed, all the issues with Biden. And just like everyone else in the world, we all saw it. We all saw what was happening with Biden. So in May 13th, Jake Tapper started promoting his book officially. Now, keep in mind all the things that are happening everywhere. You've got the trade war, you've got the Donald Trump going to the Middle East and, cutting deals with Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. I mean, these are all major deals, trillions of dollars coming back. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Simultaneously, you've got Ed Martin, who didn't make it to be the DC attorney, but now he's in the weaponization working group and he's the pardon attorney. Lots of stuff going on. And Ed Martin is relentless about attacking Joe Biden and the regime and the auto pen and all the irregularities that happened on the lawfare side. And he is tasked with going after that. So Jake Tapper, everybody's like, really, truly, everybody's getting nervous. I follow leftists, right? I follow, see what they have to say. Never comment because I don't want to raise myself to their attention. It's just not worth it. So, and I can see they're just in cover-up mode. They're just in desperation cover-up mode. There's just nothing else to do it. So he starts publishing, he starts promoting his book, and with articles and videos about original sin, detailing Biden's severe deterioration, and including discussions that Tapper had with the people that they interviewed, he and Alex, that the White House was worried that Joe Biden would have to start using a wheelchair for a potential second term. Now, in the book, if what they said was correct, they were saying that this had to do with his spine. Like if he had another fall, he'd be in a wheelchair. But knowing that he had prostate cancer and all, it's probably all one thing. It's probably his spine, his prostate cancer, his mental. He's clearly degenerating in front of us, and that's not, it's not one of those things where it's like, it's derogatory, but it's like, this is the leader of the free world. I just had this discussion this week with people because I'm like, when you work for the government, or when you're a police officer, or when you've taken an oath, you've taken the oath. You're the one that's supposed to have virtue. You're the one that's supposed to tell the truth. For us on the outside, there's no expectation from us. You can't hold me to the standard to say I have to tell you the truth. You can't hold me to any kind of standard. I haven't taken an oath. I'm not supposed to protect anything, right? It's us against you, right? So when you, and the whole idea of us empowering you to have a monopoly on force and prosecutorial power and regulatory power and all that stuff is that you'll be a fair broker and that you'll be responsive to the needs of the people. But I have no obligation other than just a generic social contract, right? Which is really just what my parents taught me, be a good person. So when you do take that oath, you have to be held to a higher standard. The president of the United States, in the position he's in, it's completely appropriate for people to say that he's not mentally aware, to challenge his well-being. He's an alpha. Alphas get challenged. That's the whole point, right? So you should be at the top of your game. I mean, this is the person that represents the people of the United States of America. How can we possibly allow this guy to have, it's one thing if he's got some, bone spur, or he's got some condition that doesn't affect his mind or doesn't affect his ability to be available. But when you've got late stage cancer, like the guy just said, it's impossible that they didn't know he had cancer during his presidency. This could take his life at any moment. That means Kamala Harris was like not just a heartbeat. I mean, she was literally a heartbeat away. Literally a heartbeat away. Like we could have woke up one day and found out that Joe Biden passed away in his sleep. I mean, he's that advanced of age and in illness. In the book that Tapper wrote, there's a highlight where Joe Biden doesn't even recognize George Clooney at that fundraiser he did. That's pretty bad for a president. If he can't recognize like your top bundler, your top fundraiser, especially a celebrity like George Clooney, no wonder he was mixing up the name of Zelensky with Putin and calling Macron the president of Egypt. It was like constant mess. It was more than a stutter. This was someone who just wasn't keeping it together. Looking back at the last 4 years, I mean, how many times did you see the dozen times that Biden did a press conference, holding notes, pre-scripted answers, all that stuff? This is all playing into this bigger narrative. So on May 14th, further book promotions and revelations from Jake Tapper. CNN and other outlets continue covering Original Sin, with Tapper discussing Biden's declining health, specific anecdotes such as cabinet members being isolated from Biden basically throughout the presidency and throughout the entire campaign. And there was one cabinet secretary that I guess described Biden as mumbly and incoherent in spring of 2024. So the Democrat Party was still trying to push us onto Joe Biden. It's really interesting because Clyburn, Representative Clyburn from South Carolina, he got on the news, I think it was Sunday morning or Saturday morning, before the announcement of Biden's terminal cancer, stage 5 cancer that has metastasized into the bone. He got up and said Biden was fit and well enough and he could have served all the way through 2029. What? These people are evil. These people absolutely do not have your best interests in mind. It's just unbelievably stunning how they do that. So the book coverage expands Washington Post reviews Original Sin, emphasizing its focus on Biden's mental health and as a defining factor in Trump's 2024 victory. So basically they're like, it was because Biden was declining that led to all the chaos in the Democrat Party. The book reporting was based on over the 200 interviews that I mentioned, details how Biden's loyalists shielded his condition, contributing to the Democratic Party's electoral losses. I think the worst thing about all of this is I know there is a segment of America that would not vote for Biden and would not vote. And their idea was, okay, people won't vote for Biden because he's just too old. So let's swap him out with Kamala. But what they don't realize is they're still focusing on the fact that they think America thinks this was just all about Joe Biden. No, it's not just about Joe Biden. It's about that you're the party that covered it up. It's about that you're the party that pushed on Kamala Harris. It's about you're the party that didn't have a primary and gave us a presidential candidate without a primary, right? So the cover up is way bigger than any political scandal. Right? I don't consider Russiagate a political scandal. I consider that a treasonous scandal. That is a sedition scandal. Trying to get Joe Biden into the office with mental illness and with physical ailments that could potentially keep him from being able to execute the duties of his office, that's a political scandal. I mean, technically he's alive. Technically he's doing it. Maybe in some lucid moments he's okay. But this is a political scandal. This is everybody trying to cover their butts. This is everybody trying to make it sound like, everything's okay. You think about that op-ed that George Clooney wrote saying, Biden's not doing so well. This is after, of course, saying everything was fine. But even in that op-ed, what if Clooney had come out and said something like he couldn't remember who I was? Like that would have, he essentially had the same function, but he should have raised that alarm right away. Okay. So then on May 16th, so at the same time all this backlash is happening, finding out that Biden's got all these problems, James Comey goes and posts a picture on the beach of seashells arranged in words that say 8647. If you've spent any time on X or Truth or some of the other social medias, you've probably seen shell images on a beach that say all kinds of things. This all started from Comey posting the 8647. So 86, what that means is that's an old mafia term for drive them 8 miles out and bury them 6 feet under. 86, take them 86, right? 8 miles out, 6 feet under. And then that has become common slang for just eliminate it, get rid of it. Throw the lettuce away, says the restaurant owner to the cook, right? 86 that lettuce, get rid of it. It's rotten, right? So it becomes very common. The idea that James Comey didn't know that 86 was a reference to elimination or assassination or something like that is, in my opinion, ridiculous, right? Like, I don't know that I've ever used the phrase to 86 something. It's just not in my vernacular, but I know what it means. I had zero questions what that meant. I've watched mafia movies. Okay. 86 is not uncommon. The idea that James Comey, a guy from New York who's been prosecuting mobsters and gangsters and all kinds of things, just somehow made it through all that criminal experience and didn't know the main phrase for assassination. That's like a pot smoker not knowing what 420 means. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Okay. On top of that, James Comey is in the middle of writing is about to publish, if it's not published already, a book that's about the FBI going after right-wing influences who are using, he called it Socratic rhetoric to inflame violence. And so basically it was like, influencers being like, geez, it would be sure nice if somebody went and took care of that. So it's like, it's not a direct thing, but it's an implied. So he's writing this book about it, basically, projecting onto the conservatives precisely what the left has been doing. Now, in fairness, there's a Hegelian dialect. It happens on both sides, but nonetheless, it is pretty revelatory. So James Comey posts, former FBI director James Comey posts in the Instagram photo of seashells arranged in 8647 with the caption, "Cool formation on my beach walk." Trump supporters interpreted the 86, which is slang for get rid of, recently kill, 8 miles out, 6 miles down, as a threat against Trump. Comey deletes the post after backlash stating he opposes violence of any kind. Okay, so then that's May 16th. On May 17th, James Comey gets a nice little Secret Service interview because the Secret Service does know what 86 means, right? So Comey voluntarily meets with the Secret Service. They actually came and picked him up in Washington, D.C. for about an hour. Allegedly, it was 70 minutes to discuss the 8647 post. Following claims by Trump supporters and figures like Tulsi Gabbard that it included violence against Trump. He is not held in custody currently. Trump, in a Fox News interview, claims Comey was calling for his assassination. So Tulsi Gabbard did an interview where she was asked directly, does James Comey belong in jail? And she goes, do you believe he belongs in jail? She goes, I do. Like, she was unequivocal about it. It's like, I do. You've had Ed Martin come out and make a statement. You've had Kash Patel come out and say they're aware of the threats and they're assisting the Secret Service. I haven't seen a statement from the Secret Service. There was another online influencer, one of the Krasenstein brothers, who, by the way, the Krasenstein brothers would make X and Twitter pages that were like fan pages for Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift or whoever else. And they would do a bunch of little like, pages that would garner a lot of follows because they'd be posting trending pictures of pop stars. Well, once they got to a certain size, what they did is they basically converted the account over to a political account, and they already had hundreds of thousands of followers. So they didn't get all these followers by having good hot take political statements. They have all these followers as a residue of having a bunch of hot chicks on their Twitter pages and other methods. They've also done a bunch of scams and stuff like that. So these guys are in my opinion, the ultimate online grifters. I mean, it's just click farming, bait farming, and stuff like that. And they used to be supportive of Trump, but then they got in trouble for something and all of a sudden things switched. So just letting you know, Krasensteins, they repeated the thing and the Secret Service gave them a visit too. Calling for death online, not a good idea. And, I've made a lot of rhetorical statements, some of them which I've, paid dearly for making. So I am in this position where I'm like, you took the oath. You have a position of trust and leadership. You can't be making threats. It's just that simple. You're not a peasant. You have a standard. You took an oath to a standard. So there's no leeway. There's no wiggle room on this one. You're going to sleep in the bed you made. When I was in prison, in the facility that I was in, there was an individual who was in prison for quite a few years. I want to say like 5 years for making threats against Melania Trump and Donald Trump's kids online. Right. There's another individual from Arizona last year who made threats against Joe Biden. This is an old man who's actually Mormon, who was making basically just incendiary threats online. He had no access to Joe Biden. No way was he probably going to cross his paths, but he got he got swatted, right? Not swatted. He got raided, swatted, and they actually shot him dead in the raid. Right. So he gave up his life because he crap posted online. I served time with a guy who was in, he was in for espionage. He was my roommate for Russian espionage. Longer story for another day, but at the end of the day, it was all about just Twitter post, troll posting online about Russiagate. And that led to a scenario where he was, in my opinion, entrapped into a alleged being a Russian spy, even though he has no connections to Russia. So it gets pretty hairy there. When you're making threats against public figures, especially in an online forum, there's probably going to be some consequences. My suggestion is we have to articulate our differences. We have to be a loyal opposition at all times. Can't just go out and be like, oh, assassinate. The idea that the former director of the FBI, who's essentially the leader of the largest mob organization on the planet, who has a monopoly on force, okay, the idea that he would call for an assassination is stunning, considering the fact that does anybody believe that the FBI doesn't have like hit teams or CIA? I mean, this is like crazy, especially when you factor in all the Russiagate stuff. Everybody's been, on the right, is thinking James Comey is a nexus of corruption. I mean, General Flynn's telling, for a long time, has been telling Comey to measure up for his jumpsuit for prison. And then, so all this is happening, right? Jake Tapper's book's coming out. He's like, hey, there's going to be revelations about Joe Biden. Trump's having the week of his life. I mean, he's cutting deals in the Middle East. He's bringing money back to America. Stunning what he has been doing in the last month. So then you've got James Comey with like a huge distraction calling for an assassination, which is in right. I honestly kind of expected him to be actually in custody much, much sooner than later, in my opinion. If not, there's an accountability problem going on. We all know this. This isn't new, right? We're all waiting for something to happen. But this weekend to me felt like another one of those real big momentum shifts. Trump's Truth Social page is just full of QE, when did the trials for treason begin? Trump posted a video of Hillary Clinton and all the people she's allegedly, her body count death list, including John F. Kennedy Jr., by the way, which is like the premise of the entire Q phenomenon, is this idea that JFK Jr. is helping Donald Trump, which seems odd considering he may or may not be dead. I think he's dead. Q himself said he's dead. So just for anybody who paid attention. So then on May 17th, the same day that Comey gets interviewed by the FBI, we have the release of the Hur tapes. So the Hur tapes was the special counsel that was appointed during the Biden administration to look into the Biden businesses and just all of that. and specifically the classified documents that Joe Biden kept when he had no right to keep them when he was senator and vice president. So those tapes were released. There was a transcript released before, and if you remember, Merrick Garland wouldn't release the tapes. It was a cover-up. It was a cover-up. Now we know it was a cover-up. You release the tapes, and it does sound like Biden was a bumbling idiot. He couldn't remember dates, couldn't remember things, and more than anything, he was obfuscating, and he was being covered by his lawyers who wouldn't let him answer certain questions once he gave contradictory answers to his previous answers. So the release of the tapes actually was published. They got a couple excerpts, and apparently we're going to get the rest of the tapes. They're going to go to Congress, and I'm sure they'll get released, but these were just excerpts from Joe Biden's October 23 interview, and this interview was happening on October 8th of 2023, which was the day after the October 7th attacks of Palestine into Israel. And this is really significant because here you have what very well could have been the official start of World War III, right, where it went kinetic in the Middle East. I don't know. Who knows when the start of that could be if we continue to engage in it. But, you know, you've got this massive crisis going on, and Biden's over there. When did Donald Trump get inaugurated? It was 2017. Something happened. You know, Bo was either with cancer or he was deployed. It was like, it's pretty interesting. Go listen to it. And it is shocking. Remember, this is the guy who's leading the world. And then contrast that with Donald Trump, who's like, you know, stage shuffling to YMCA and cutting deals and doing long form interviews and taking hot press questions with no prep. It's pretty stunning. The tapes authenticated by the DOJ reveal Biden's halting speech, long pauses, struggles to recall details like his son Bo's death in 2015. He's like, 2017, Bo was... and Trump's election 2016. He didn't even know when Trump was elected. The White House had withheld the audio in 2024, citing executive privilege, but its release reignites scrutiny of Biden's mental acuity, aligning with original sins claimed. So again, this is one of those like controlled releases. This is getting out in front of this book, which I think is also a cover-up. I think this was bad, guys. I think there was a hospital incident when Biden went to Las Vegas and had to cancel that rally with the Hispanic group, and there was a leaked 911 phone call where they were like, we have to get the president, we have to help the president. Bongino covered it. Everybody, it was covered. What happened, right? We have no idea what happened. So then on May 17th, so the Her tapes come out. How convenient. Everything that goes on. It takes a couple days at least to write an article like that, right? You get the tapes, you've got to go through them, you got to listen to them, you got to pull out the highlights, the excerpts, you got to figure out the angle that you're going to write your story. You got to write your story, right? Because it's breaking news, so everybody's going to cite your stuff, so you got to have it tight. You got editors, you got all kinds of stuff going there. You got to make sure it conforms with the narrative, right? All that comes out on the 17th, and then randomly, out of nowhere, Reuters reports Joe Biden was diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer, and that has spread to his bones through his, and though his office states it can be effectively managed, this aligns with an ex-post claiming Biden's diagnosis occurred in May 16th or 17th, coinciding with the Her tapes released in Comey's Secret Service interview. No further details confirm the exact date or context within these provided sources, and some ex-post claim suggest the diagnosis was strategically timed to deflect criticism on Biden's mental health cover-up. So if Biden was not sick and he was just sitting back having, you know, old timers and some very normal ailments for an elderly person, there would be criticism from the left saying, oh, you're just picking on an old man. Or, you know, it was like the left is still going with the facade that he is competent, capable. He's just old and why are you picking on him? Or, you know, or they wouldn't be able to say why are you picking on him, because Biden held himself out as being capable to take on Trump. You can't defend an alpha who's trying to be an alpha by saying, oh, leave him alone when he's an old man. I mean, this was the exact tack they took with Robert Hur, telling Robert Hur in open committee hearings that he was playing politics with the investigation and all these kind of things. So, excuse me. And so the idea that now, as soon as we're like about to have a book saying that there was a cover up, now he's officially sick with cancer. And so now I'll leave him alone. But what this does is this validates the reason why people would cover for him, right? Because it's like, oh, you got to protect the old man. He was sincerely injured and sick. It just validates all the suspicions we have. It's unbelievable. And it takes all the attention off his misdeeds because he's stage 5 terminal prostate cancer that's metastasized into his bones. So he's got months to live, most likely, if not less. I mean, by the way, for those of you that are big on conspiracies, there's a podcaster named Tori Morris who years ago used to say that this is exactly what was going to happen. Is they're going to say you can't, that Joe Biden's going to die, and they're going to say you can't criticize him while you're mourning. So while crap is going on and everybody wants, Joe Biden's the nexus of a massive scandal along with Obama with Russiagate and just basically everything that happened the last 9 years, 10 years. They're going to try to silence, the mainstream media is going to try to silence critics, being like, you can't criticize an old man, let him rest in peace. Senator Cornyn put a post on X saying, he was praying for Biden's quick, speedy recovery. And I said, I'll finish the statement for you. I'm praying for your speedy recovery so that you can be held accountable. Right? Biden, if he dies, he's going to escape accountability. Of course, the other thing that happened too is Ed Martin announced he's officially going to be looking into all the pardons and stuff like that. The AutoPin scandal is pretty big. I see a lot of chatter about the AutoPin scandal. People wondering, well, is Ketanji Brown Jackson a legitimate Supreme Court justice? What about all these other things? And while I think there is a letter of the law technical sense that yes, the last 4 years were legitimate, and yes, everything that he signed was potentially fraudulent, and you can say all those things from a technicality standpoint at the point of which you go back and look at the 2020 election. For my listeners and peasants, I think I need to dispel you of the myth that anything's going to change about what was signed, bills that were made, laws that were passed, Supreme Court justice that was confirmed. I don't think anything's going to change, because here's the reason. It's consent of the governed. We consented for 4 years to allow that to happen. Did you raise up in the streets? Did you stop paying your taxes? Did you do anything to signify to the United States government that you were not consenting to what they were doing and that they had no legitimate authority? No? Okay, we consented as a people. And that's how it works. You think about anything. Why don't we transact in gold and silver? Why is it actually against the law to be able to use a gold coin at the grocery store? Why? It says in the Constitution, gold and silver for all debts, public and private. But you can't do that. Why? Because we've consented to it. They broke the law. They broke the Constitution. And then we were like, okay. Oh, and by the way, we want taxes. Okay. Right? The whole thing's a joke. I have a video from Kash Patel from before he was nominated the director of the FBI, where he's talking about the Federal Reserve. And he's like, it's not government. It's a private bank. It's a cartel. We should be doing something. It shouldn't be that way. I don't know what to do. I don't know the solution, but we got to look at it. Everybody knows this. The Federal Reserve's private. Our whole money supply is messed up. The whole system is just kind of like a big mess, to say the least. Okay. So, So this weekend, the other thing that Donald Trump had going on was he was posting all kinds of funny memes. I wish I could scroll through it with you guys. Take a chance, go to Truth Social or whatever social media. You've probably, if you're active on social media, you've likely seen a clip, or a post. But I mean, it's things like all roads lead to Obama. Obviously, the video talking about the body count that Hillary Clinton has as far as people that were supposed to show up and testify, things like that. It's pretty incredible. Okay. So some of the media pundits, these are people that we got to watch out for. These are people who covered for Joe Biden. Jen Psaki. She's the White House press secretary. As White House press secretary in 2021, 2022, Psaki deflected concerns about Biden's mental capacity. In February 2022, when asked about Biden's mental sharpness amid GOP demands for a cognitive test, she emphasized his leadership during crises, comparing his challenges to those faced by Obama and Bush, and avoided directly addressing cognitive concerns. As an MSNBC host, she continued to support Biden through specific post-22 statements on his cognition, and less documented in the sources that I pulled up. So the other person is Karine Jean-Pierre, another White House secretary. These two individuals, in their capacity as White House secretary, I'm a little bit like, yeah, you lied to us. You're not supposed to lie to us, but can we just be honest, guys? That's basically what the White House press secretary's job is to do, is to spin the narrative in the context, to maintain power and consent and buy-in and all that kind of stuff for the executive branch, and specifically the president. So I don't fault them for covering it. I don't think they'd be the ones that would come out and go, Biden's a little shaky back there in our prep. I don't think they're going to do that. But nonetheless, the fact that they continue doubling down just shows that they're team players, that they're committed to a narrative and to a party and an ideology, rather, and even to the point of propping up a weekend at Bernie's president, right, versus just telling the truth about that matter. I mean, it's pretty stunning. Karine Jean-Pierre and Jen Psaki both knew that the guy with the nuclear footballs was in hiding mode. Other news sources that made big statements about endorsing Biden's health: New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Washington Times Daily, The Washington Times in July 4th of 2024 claims journalists witnessed Biden's incoherence but didn't report it to avoid aiding Trump. So it's like they knew it. In May 1st, 2025, Reason, right, argued that mainstream media adopted Biden's defenders' framing, dismissing conservative claims as exaggerated. Specific pundits weren't always named, but the narrative suggests the broader reluctance to Biden's fitness. So the other thing is politicians. Some big politicians that you got to watch out for who came out and endorsed Biden and said that he was good to go. Elizabeth Warren, big one. Elizabeth Warren claims that Biden was cognitively sound till all of a sudden the 2025 elections, right? The 2024 election. She got kind of pinned down. And I think we played this clip. This was quite a few weeks ago, where there was a leftist podcaster who was interviewing, and she's like, "When did you know that Biden was bad?" She's like, "Oh, well, he could walk and talk." And he's like, "Senator Warren, walking and talking is not a defense here." And she's like, fair enough. Basically admitting, yeah, we were all lying to you, right? Obviously, Joe Biden never mentioned any. Well, actually, Joe Biden did slip a couple times. He mentioned he had cancer and stuff like that. So he knew. He said, I have the clip. I can't play it because we're doing it, on the road today, but I'd play you Biden saying that in Delaware, they were putting oil on the road and it got on the windshields. And that's why Delaware had the highest cancer rates, including himself having cancer. So he admitted it. Kevin O'Connor is another one who's Biden's physician. This one's a big deal. The physician of the, there are a couple positions that are like bottleneck pinch points. So, for example, being the physician of the president of the United States, you hold a whole lot of power. Like if he goes, he's not competent, it's over. 25th Amendment, boom, it's over. So clearly he's got to make statements that he can stand by. So Kevin O'Connor, while he's not a politician, O'Connor's role as Biden's doctor is relevant. In December 2019, he issued a report calling Biden a healthy, vigorous, 77-year-old male fit to successfully execute the duties of the presidency. Does that sound like someone that was telling the truth, knowing what we know now? Knowing what we know about Jake Tapper's book? This guy, Kevin O'Connor, should have his medical license stripped. This is pretty stunning. He later reports in November 21, February 2023, and February 2024, he described Biden as fit for duty after physicals with a 2024 exam noting no neurological disorders or Parkinson's disease. There was a lot of suspicion that the Biden's neurological disorder is Parkinson's related. And why do we know this? Because in the White House logs had Joe Biden meeting with a Parkinson's doctor over and over and over again. So something was going on there. But either ways, it drew criticism. And but now it's like you're hearing doctors all around the world being like, it's impossible to get stage 5 prostate cancer metastasized and you didn't catch it if you've had blood works done in the last any period of time, right? So it's, again, stunning. Many Democrats like Chuck Schumer avoiding commenting on Biden's health. Again, he just avoided the topic altogether, focusing on policy to sidestep the issue. Political on May 15th, 2025 noted Schumer's science contributed to the party's credibility issue when Biden's decline became undeniable. This suggests a broader strategy of not engaging with cognitive concerns rather than explicitly affirming Biden's health. So when he would get asked, he'd say things like the clip he said yesterday, we're looking forward, right? And by not taking it on directly, Schumer was kind of hedging. He was like, I don't want to be the one that says he's doing fine, but I don't want to be the one in the party that criticizes him. And so he just hedged. He just didn't answer, which then created the suspicions, which now have proven to be true. What are the conspiracy theorists is that now? Is it like 700 to 2? I think it's like 700 to 2. Yeah. I think Epstein killed himself. I think that's the one, right? Which, by the way, that was another thing that happened this weekend. Dan Bongino and Cash Patel had an interview with Maria Bartiromo. Great clips, by the way. A couple things. First of all, they said that this week or next week, we're going to get more information about January 6th and government involvement inside the crowd that day. And Bongino strongly implied that there were actual government officials that are on the payroll, work for the government, that were possibly inciting the crowd. So we're going to find out about that. They talked about finding new evidence in the Russiagate scandal, and even greater than they did. And these are the two guys who probably know more about it than anyone else other than the people who did it themselves, right? So there was a pretty wide-ranging interview. So the last 3-4 days have been pretty monumental. And last week was an amazing week for Donald Trump. The other thing that happened too, which is really stunning, which we haven't even talked about, was the Supreme Court, based on the idea, the Supreme Court decided that the Trump administration couldn't use the Alien and Enemies Act in the way that they were doing that the notice that they gave for removal was not sufficient. So they remanded it back to the lower courts to litigate and adjudicate and figure out what is appropriate notice and what is appropriate process for people that are being sent out of the country. Now, this is really frustrating to me. This is angering to me beyond all of my ability to see straight. Somebody did the math. From the moment the first January 6er was arrested and had their rights viciously violated, okay, it took 30,000 hours. 30,000 hours. People sat in prison, including myself. 30,000 hours. I lost my business. I separated from my family, lost my income, lost assets, lost property. I lost a lot. Okay. 30,000 hours from the first violation of rights over January 6th, which I promise we're going to find out was a insurrection. That's my opinion, right? 30,000 hours before the Supreme Court provided relief on the Fisher ruling. And then they still didn't just dismiss people's cases. They put the burden on them to go through appeals and take months and months and months to get resentenced and released. Massive violation of power, rights, due process, you name it. Illegal aliens who have been declared members of a foreign terrorist organization, Tren de Agua, MS-13, etc., etc. It took 13 hours for the Supreme Court to hear it, for them to get an injunction. 13 hours, and the ACLU chastised the judge for taking so long because these guys had to sit in detention. Hours. 30,000 hours versus hours. That's what an American citizen gets you versus what an illegal alien gets you. My reading of the Constitution tells me that you don't have jurisdiction over illegal aliens other than to expel them. You don't have jurisdiction over foreign invaders. The military does. This is what is really infuriating about this. The idea that the Constitution just blanketly applies to everybody and they get all the protections without doing any of the work and none of the obligations. An illegal alien gets due process rights and access to our courts, but yet he doesn't have to return the favor and, lose time and money by serving on a jury duty. An illegal alien has access to due process and financial incentives while not actually being required to pay into the IRS. Illegals don't voluntarily pay. Employers just withhold and pay on their behalf, right? It's not like they're out there filing tax returns. That's not what they're doing. It's just they're in the flow of money. Employers hold the money. Nobody files a tax return. There's no return. The government actually ends up at a net positive because they don't, send child tax credits back because they don't actually file. The government just collects and it just sits in the account. The whole thing is a scam, man. When illegal aliens from Tren de Agua get protection from the courts, but actual patriotic Americans can't even get basic due process rights. And these due process rights are the ones that the left thinks are things like habeas corpus and things like that, right? Due process just means the process that is due. If you're standing on American soil and you do not have residency and you do not have citizenship, the process that is due for you is someone walking up to you and saying, "Can I see your identification?" And if the answer is no, or the response is some kind of identification that denotes that you're not supposed to be present, you have just been given your due process to prove that you're supposed to be here or can be here. And if you fail that test, the next due process is removal. Not habeas corpus, not trial by jury, none of that. None of that. The process that you are due is to say, I can be here, I can't, here's my ID here. You know what I mean? It's that simple. It's not, due process is not a thing. It's just the process that due. It's two words, what you do, the process. Okay. When I have a dispute with my cell phone provider, I don't have rights of like habeas corpus. I don't have rights of speedy trial. I don't have those kind of rights as due process, but I do have due process because there is a way for me to complain. There's a process to follow, and everybody follows that process. When one of the things I understood about the 14th Amendment was this concept that due process wasn't like a court thing. It was that you're due equal process to everybody. So like when I would go apply for building permits, I would demand due process. I wouldn't allow them to do anything different. And I also would say, you shall issue the permit. You will issue the permit if I check all these boxes, right? If I do the things that we've agreed to do, you shall issue the permit. And so that's the process. I follow these steps. You shall issue me the permit. There's no subjective ability. Government bureaucrats cannot be subjective. They can't, because that would violate due process. They must be completely objective and they must follow the protocol. This is the problem that I complain about, how when they don't follow the policies, or if the policies are poorly written, good people end up enforcing bad laws because they're only supposed to follow the policy. Good people have to stand up to it and have to take a moral stand and change the policy. But as long as the policy's there, everybody's supposed to be equal to it, which is why it's so infuriating that they did things like come after Donald Trump for the classified documents, but not Joe Biden. Yet Donald Trump actually was the president and had a right to classify and declassify those documents, where Joe Biden didn't. But they both didn't get the same due process. They weren't treated equally under the law. I mean, Trump will get campaign complaints if there's a paid endorsement, but if Kamala Harris hires Beyonce and Springsteen, there's no account, and pays them for their endorsement, there's no equality here, right? It's due process is equal protection under the law. Everybody has to follow the process the same. And the process isn't a legal process. It's just that the process should apply equally. At this point in our country, I don't like the idea of a cop walking up and being like, "Can I see your papers?" Because I'm antithetical to that. I hate that concept. But at the same time, we're at a time of crisis. This is one of those times where we have to figure out a way to do this. I don't think it's just as simple as walking up to someone, everybody's black or brown, and being like, "Can I see your paperwork?" That's not going to happen. But it is something where it's like, look, if you have a removal order, your due process was whatever it took to get to that removal order. The next thing is removal. Okay. Like, it's not trial by jury, because remember, in a traditional trial, the way it's supposed to work is the law's on trial so could you imagine them taking an immigrant on trial and then the jury being like, "Oh, those immigration laws are bunk"? Bad plan. So the Supreme Court did that. It's not a no, but it's a huge wrench in the deportation. And keep in mind, Amy Comey Barrett actually, in her opinion during the Trump administration, she said basically that she wants courts to follow the process and for things to go through appeals. She doesn't like the emergency docket at the Supreme Court. So when the conservatives sued to prevent Biden from doing the open border policies, Amy Comey Barrett said, "Oh, well, this isn't an emergency issue. It needs to go through the process and through all the courts." And so she was basically saying, "Oh, there can be a delay." Well, in this decision, she was one of the ones that voted 7-2 to say that there wasn't appropriate notice given. And she basically said the exact opposite. She said, "Well, this is so important, we have to take this case." It's like, so it's not important enough when they're invading, but when we're trying to remove the known invaders, then we want to slow it down and, or then we want to take these cases because they're political and decide the opposite. It's maddening. Mike Davis on X has the best commentary on this, but it does make you just, these people do not always stand on principle, and they hold themselves out to be that. We, the peasants, can be idiots. We're the public. We're the unknowing, the unthinking, the unaware, the whatever, right? Like, we can be often wrong, never in doubt. We're only as good as the information we get. But when you step into a position of authority and leadership, the burden changes, right? We'll give grace if you're honest with us. If you make a mistake, own up to it, said, "I did this, it wasn't work, or this doesn't work," and you own it, we're good. But when you make mistake and then the cover up, and then mistake and the cover up, and pretty soon we're living in a house of cards. We just had a president who's got cancer. He's got dementia. He's got who knows else what's going on. He's got an auto pen. He's got 27 shell corporations that provide no service but funnel millions of dollars through it. He's got bribes coming from all over the planet. And we're supposed to just sit here and be like, not how it works. So, so this weekend's been very interesting. I'm very curious to see what continues to happen. Dan Bongino and Kash Patel told Maria Bartiromo, just give us a couple weeks, like 1 or 2 weeks. There's going to be a wave of transparency. I'm looking for a wave of accountability. I do agree with Ed Martin that in the current climate, you've got to get the information out before you can really do prosecutions. But nonetheless, it looks like we're heading in that direction. So I'm excited about that. You guys, this is pretty much it for the show today. Obviously, didn't get to play the clips. I'll still work on it, see if I can figure out how to play some videos tomorrow or figure that out. But I really appreciate you guys joining me. I really appreciate you guys coming out. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow morning. Same time, same place. You guys can put up the bat signal. Bye. Oh, and by the way, no intro, outro. So this is it. See ya.